Microaggressions, narcissist. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. You will be familiar with the concept of a microaggression. A microaggression is a term that is used for commonplace, daily, verbal, behavioural, or environmental slights, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative attitudes towards stigmatized or culturally marginalized groups. The term was coined by Harvard University psychiatrist Chester M. Pierce in 1970 to describe insults and dismissals which he regularly witnessed non-black Americans inflicting on African Americans. By the early 21st century, use of the term was applied to the casual degradation of any socially marginalized group, including LGBT people, poor people, and disabled people. Psychologist Derald Wing Sue defines microaggressions as brief, everyday exchanges that send denigrating messages to certain individuals because of their group membership. The persons making the comments may be otherwise well-intentioned and unaware of the potential impact of their words. A number of scholars and social commentators have criticized the microaggression concept for its lack of scientific basis, over-reliance on subjective evidence, and promotion of psychological fragility. Critics argue that avoiding behaviors that one interprets as microaggressions restricts one's own freedom and causes emotional self-harm, and that employing authority figures to address microaggressions, i.e. call-out culture, can lead to an atrophy of those skills needed to mediate one's own disputes. Some argue that because the term microaggression uses language connoting violence to describe verbal conduct, it can be used to exaggerate harm resulting in retribution and the elevation of victimhood. D.W. Sue, who popularized the term microaggressions, has expressed doubts on how the concept is being used. I was concerned that people who use these examples would take them out of context and use them as a punitive rather than an exemplary way. Notice the criticism of it being subjective. And also, the fact is, who is likely to pick up and perceive these microaggressions? Many people, as it's been described, that they're well-intentioned in their behaviours and unaware of the potential impact of their words. In other words, they don't realise what they're doing. They don't realise that apparently their words or behaviour causes some form of offence. But who is it that's taking offence? Who is it that is so attuned, so sensitive to particular behaviours which many other people don't even recognise? Who is it that responds to these microaggressions? Who is it that has a setting of such sensitivity, hypersensitivity, that they pick up upon these factors and deem them to be an aggression towards them? Might it be the case that those that are such attuned are indeed narcissists? As you know, I've explained that the narcissist needs four things: control, fuel, character traits, and residual benefits. And control and fuel are the most important aspects of that. When it comes to the issue of control, the narcissist is hypersensitive to control because of the way the narcissist has been created. The narcissist will perceive a threat to control in circumstances where nobody else would do. Which doesn't that match with the fact that someone would see a microaggression, i.e. a threat to control, which otherwise is not perceived by somebody else? That in the circumstances that somebody who behaves in a particular way, and they don't see anything wrong with what they've done, and many other people wouldn't do, but somebody else says, you've behaved with a microaggression towards me, i.e. subconsciously, I feel that I have been threatened in some way, i.e. my control has been threatened, and therefore my narcissism, although this individual is unlikely to realise this is the case, has caused me to respond by calling out your behaviour as a microaggression towards me. in order to make you feel ashamed or embarrassed so that you retract your behaviour, thus enabling me to assert control over you. It seems to me that the concept of a microaggression may well have originated from the response of a narcissist to having that hypersensitivity to threats of control, so that they perceive that language and behaviour causes them a slight when none was intended, and some might argue none actually took place. Microaggressions are common, everyday slights and comments that relate to various aspects of a person's appearance or identity, such as gender, sex, race, ethnicity, or age, among others. They are thought to spring from unconsciously held prejudices and beliefs, which may be demonstrated consciously or unconsciously through daily verbal interactions. Although these communications typically appear harmless to observers, they are considered a form of covert racism or everyday discrimination. Microaggressions differ from what Pearce referred to as macroaggressions, which are more extreme forms of racism, such as lynchings or beatings, due to their ambiguity, size, and commonality. Microaggressions are experienced by most stigmatized individuals and occur on a regular basis. These can be particularly stressful for people on the receiving end, as they are easily denied by those committing them. They are also harder to detect by members of the dominant culture, as they are often unaware they are causing them. Sue describes microaggressions as including statements that repeat or affirm stereotypes about the minority group or subtly demean its members. Now, it would appear to me that the origins of this sensitivity may well have occurred as a consequence of the response of a narcissist, and with many of these things, they then bleed into the mainstream so that other people pick up on it and deem that it's a microaggression, whereas ordinarily they wouldn't have picked up on it themselves, and they realise that these terms thus become stigmatised. For instance, descriptions of an Asian American woman as a dragon lady, tiger mom, or lotus blossom, or using symbols associated with Eastern cultures. Many people may not regard those as a problem at all. But of course, a narcissist with a hypersensitivity to control would pick up on something there which the majority would not see as problematic and would perceive it as a threat to control. Indeed, in certain instances, that narcissist may feel a threat to control caused by something else and then uses the fact that the term dragon lady, tiger mom, or lotus blossom has been used as an excuse to nullify the other perceived threat to control that has occurred. As you know, in some instances, the narcissist will complain about your actual behaviour because that is the threat to control, or in other instances, complain about something else, something unrelated, something that doesn't even match with what's going on, as a means to assert control over you. An example of that, as a client of mine, he had gone away, his wife had gone away for the weekend. She was a narcissist, looked after 2 young children, cleaned the house from top to bottom, did all the laundry, and when she came back, he said, she looked around the house and I could see her almost scanning it. And then she said to me, "Why have you washed the towels?" And he said, I thought to myself, does she think that I've done something unsavoury on the towels and that I've had to wash them all? And then he made mention of the fact that on the Saturday evening a friend had come over for a few beers and stayed over. And she remarked, "Why did he stay over? Are you gay?" And he said, I don't understand why she's made this comment about the towels and why she's accused me of being gay. She knows that I'm not. And I explained, it's got nothing to do with the towels. It's got nothing to do with you being gay. It's the fact that when she's returned from a weekend away, you've demonstrated that you can manage without her, and that has wounded her. And therefore, in order to provoke you, her narcissism has then sought out some extra information and has gone to the suggestion that you've washed the towels and that's a bad thing and that you may be gay. It doesn't actually fit with what has gone on, but that doesn't matter because the narcissism has just plucked something from somewhere to provoke you, and it worked because you responded. She was wounded by the fact that you could manage without her. You didn't intend to wound her, but you did because of what you had done, even though it was benign and helpful. And then her narcissism, in a necessity of trying to nullify that threat to control, just picked a couple of random things which seemed loosely related to what had gone on. So again, in this instance, what could occur is that the narcissist, when threatened in relation to control, responds by picking up on something else, So, for instance, the narcissist might be wounded by somebody turning up late, and then in the conversation, the person makes reference to them being a dragon lady, tiger mom, or lotus blossom, and then says, you shouldn't use that against me, you shouldn't say that as a microaggression. And it isn't actually about that term, but the term is being used to browbeat the victim because of the fact that they turned up late and wounded the narcissist. Now, of course, there will be some instances where such behaviours are problematic, but it seems to me that the origins of this concept of microaggression, because of the subtlety of it, and also that somebody would have to be hypersensitive to these issues to raise them in the first place, may well have caused its origination with narcissists. And we have a further example of an individual utilising the idea of microaggression in circumstances which doesn't appear to actually be applicable. As reported in the Telegraph, black lecturer who complained of failure to put correct nameplate on her door loses racism tribunal. Dr. Christabel Peters said it was a microaggression the plaque did not include her academic title, unlike her white university colleagues. A black university lecturer sued for race discrimination because the nameplate on her door did not have her doctor title on it. Among a series of alleged microaggressions, Dr. Christabel Peters complained that the plaque did not include her academic title, unlike her white colleagues at the University of Bristol. The lecturer in American culture and political history made a string of other racism allegations, including that her office furniture was not delivered and that her payslips were not put in her pigeonhole. Dr. Peters also complained that a senior lecturer told her nobody gives a shit about Africa when she pitched a research idea about the continent, a tribunal heard. The academic suffered a stroke while in Portugal and alleged the university mistreated her in their handling of it. It also heard. The lecturer, who is black British of Guyanese origin, has lost all her claims at an employment tribunal. At the week-long hearing in Bristol, in which Dr. Peters represented herself, that, of course, is self-representation is often an indicator that that individual can't get along with their lawyers, although it might be that she just chose not to or couldn't afford them. She brought claims of race discrimination, race harassment, victimisation and disability discrimination. The tribunal heard Dr. Peters joined the university in September 2016 and placed an order for extra chairs and a coffee table so she could meet with students, but it was delayed and she had to pay for them. She also complained her title was not included in the nameplate on her door, and 3 times in 2017 her payslips went missing. Now, many of you would think, so what? What's the problem with all of those? Yet Dr. Peters said she was the victim of microaggressions, but the university said they were simple errors, and the tribunal ruled in their favour. The tribunal found that the nameplate issue was an administrative error, that another lecturer had the same problem happen to him, and that the nameplates are often prepared by junior workers who are not aware what the lecturers look like. Therefore, to suggest that the nameplate omission was purely a microaggression towards her doesn't bear out. But of course, she may perceive it as a threat to her control, and therefore claims racism through microaggression as a means to nullify that threat to control. The tribunal heard when Dr. Peters was making an application for a research project about Africa in 2018, a senior lecturer told her nobody gives a shit about Africa. The comment had a marked effect on Dr. Peters, and she felt depressed by it. Many of you listening would think you feel depressed just because somebody made a remark about Africa. That seems to be a somewhat disproportionate response. The lecturer who made the comment said he was gutted that he upset her, the tribunal heard. It ruled that the university's handling of the incident was not motivated by race. And of course, that's a tribunal that's heard all of the evidence. After Dr. Peters suffered a stroke in December 2019 and did not return to work, she claimed bosses were pushing for her to take ill health retirement, and that this was racist. However, the tribunal panel found the university was also considering how it would get her to return to work when she was fit and able, which of course doesn't sit with the concept of pushing for her to take ill health retirement. And even if they were, how does that amount to being racist? Dr. Peters eventually resigned in January this year. This individual brought a tribunal claim and lost on all fronts. Now, I can't say whether Dr. Peters is a narcissist or not. I don't have enough information. But what this does demonstrate is that there clearly does appear to be, in this instance, claims brought that had no merit, which causes one to think that perhaps there was a skewed perspective in relation to those claims. By suggesting that there were microaggressions, might it be that Dr. Peters subconsciously felt a threat to control and therefore turned to issuing allegations of racism, suggesting that there were microaggressions being used to her, i.e. taking hold of what has now become a more popularized concept of microaggressions and harnessing it for her advantage, even in circumstances where it wasn't actually applicable. You may well believe that there is such a thing as microaggressions and that they are very much a thing. Fair enough, you're entitled to form that view. You may think it's nonsense and it's people overreacting and looking to find problems where they don't exist. But the very subtlety of them in the first place and the way that they have originated does suggest that it may well have arisen as a consequence of a sensitivity to a threat to control, and therefore has formed as an idea of the microaggression. And certainly in the case that I've referred to, there is a suggestion that it is clearly the case, rather, that the claims as advanced were wholly unsuccessful and without merit. And it might be, and as I say, one can only say might because we don't have the full information about Dr. Peters' behaviour and conduct over a period of time to make an assessment, but it raises a possibility that her responses were actually born out of a subconscious sensation of a threat to control, and thus, potentially, narcissism then harnessed the idea of using the concept of microaggressions as a mean to nullify those threats to control by bringing a claim to the tribunal. What do you think about the concept of microaggressions? Do you believe that they are legitimate? Do you believe perhaps that they have come from a narcissist? Do you believe that they might have come from a narcissist but they're still necessarily applicable to other people? Or do you believe that it's a load of nonsense and that it's a try-on by various people who are embedded in victimhood and indeed are narcissists making use of it, and it is bled into the mainstream? Share your comments in the comments section. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.